The search for survivors from yesterday's asylum seeker boat accident in Indonesia appears to have had little success today. The vessel sank in rough seas off the coast of Java early yesterday after interrogating the crew. Indonesian police believe there were only about 60 passengers on board, not 70 as previously thought. The death toll now stands at 8. Meanwhile, in Canberra, try as they might, neither side of politics could resist the temptation to use the tragedy to attack the other. Political correspondent Tom Iggulden reports.
Indonesian police are happy to point the finger for last night's deaths,
People smuggling.
and Tony Abbott agrees.
The government is not to blame for the tragedy unfolding in the waters of Indonesia. The opposition is certainly not to blame for this unfolding tragedy.
But the ceasefire on blame lasted for just a few minutes.
When it comes to border protection, this is a government which should simply have died of shame.
The government accused Mr Abbott of playing politics.
On the day of this tragedy, spoke about the government dying of shame. I mean, the sort of language and political discourse created by the Leader of the Opposition is one that does no credit to his great party, does no credit to this parliament and does no credit to this nation.
But the government itself used similar language.
And that is why it was such a shame and a tragedy that the legislation that we needed to put in place because of the High Court decision has not been able to pass this parliament.
It was a display of political bickering unmitigated by the fact it had been less than 24 hours since the deaths at sea.
If you can't control the borders, you can't govern the country. And if you can't govern the country, you have a clear option, and that is to call an election.
The Malaysian arrangement is precisely the sort of humanitarian arrangement that is required to ensure that we break that model. And until we break that model, we will see tragic deaths at sea.
The opposition questions the timing of the government's announcement about the sinking of the boat last night and says the Home Affairs Minister implied it was the opposition's fault.
Yeah, I thought it was grubby and disgraceful. I think Brendan O'Connor should reflect on his own comments, and I think he should make an apology for those. I mean, last night was no time for him to be scoring political points off the back of a horrible tragedy.
We thought it was appropriate to share what information we had with the Australian people. I think that's the right decision. I think you could criticise us and if we didn't release that information.
The asylum seeker issue isn't the only one on which the government's refusing to budge. Crossbenchers want changes to the mining tax introduced into Parliament today.
The government is playing hardball. You know, they don't want changes, but I'm hopeful that if I approach it in the right spirit, that I'll see the sense in it and make those changes.
Andrew Wilkie wants to cut small miners a break on the tax. They feel it favours the more powerful big ones who helped negotiate the deal. Tony Windsor's negotiating with the government to stop coal seam gas mining on prime agricultural land.
I'm not going to go into the detail of those discussions publicly, but these issues are capable of being worked through.
And the Resources Minister says the government will stick to the deal it struck with big miners, whatever the demands of the crossbench.
Do you feel like you're being held to ransom here, and will you pay up?
Well, it's the nature of the Parliament at the moment. It's an unfortunate situation. We have to deal with the cards that have dealt with us at the last election.
The government gave ground to another crossbencher today. Rob Oakeshot's been lobbying for superannuation to be paid to employees right up to the age of 75. The government now agrees and it's amended its superannuation legislation. About 18,000 elderly employees will benefit. Tom Iggulden, Late Line.